Joining me today to talk about the Karen Reed verdict and case is Kenneth Gray of the University of New Haven. He's a former FBI agent. Kenneth, you've been following this case closely, right?
Absolutely. So this case has been going on with the murder in 2022, and first trial ended in a mistrial, and now we finally have some conclusion to this after all this time.
So what was your initial reaction when you first heard the verdict, the not guilty on the 3 serious charges and the guilty on the driving drunk?
So, of course, after watching this very closely, I was not surprised by this verdict. In fact, I halfway expected the jury to end up acquitting her on all charges. But nonetheless, because of her extensive interviews she did after the first trial, she more or less confessed to operating the motor vehicle while she was under the influence. And so they came back with that, but they came back with some questions with the judge before they rendered that verdict, because they were concerned that since it was carried under the charge of manslaughter as a lesser charge, they were concerned that if they convicted her on the operating under the influence, it would end up having her charged with manslaughter. So the end result was she was acquitted on the greater charges and convicted on the lesser charge of operating under the influence.
Obviously, Karen Reed had a ton of supporters. This trial drew crowds every single day to that Dedham courtroom. Now, the jury obviously isn't allowed to watch the media, read anything online about the case itself, but I mean, seeing supporters there when you're coming in and out of the courtroom on a daily basis, does that sway public opinion at all?
I'm sure it did. I mean, there were thousands of people there on the last couple of days of the trial, but nonetheless, as you said, there was a large group that was out there every day when she was coming in and out of the courthouse, and when the jury was coming in and out. And so, despite the fact that they are not supposed to be checking the media and such, I'm sure there must have been times where they might have happened upon reports showing the amount of support she had. This is very unusual. She was accused of murdering a Boston police officer, and yet to have this number of people supporting her shows how much they found that charging her was an injustice. And so now the big question is justice for John O'Keefe. Will the state go and reinvestigate this case and try to find the person actually responsible? Or are they going to claim that Karen Reed was responsible, but they didn't have the evidence to convict her?
I'm curious, do you think that they can go back and reinvestigate the case when we know that the investigation was so botched?
Well, that's really the problem here, is that this case was botched from the get-go. Here it is, a snowstorm. They're out trying to collect up evidence there from the front yard. They didn't take photographs. They didn't make a drawing. They didn't make any measurements. The evidence that would have been useful to convict her was not found until days later, and there was no security of that crime scene for all those days. And so anyone could come in there and put that evidence in that place. And that's what the defense was referring to, that that evidence was not found until days later by the lead investigator, who was fired on the case. And so not only was the evidence not collected up correctly, but the investigation was being done by a person who, Michael Proctor, who had connections to the Alberts there that owned the house where this occurred at. And so this was a messed up investigation. So there really is nothing there for a cold case squad to come in and investigate. It was a botched investigation from the very beginning.
Right, and I do want to talk a little bit more about the lead investigator, Proctor, who was then fired from the Massachusetts State Police. Now, he, of course, was accused of framing Reed, something that he then denied. What role did that play in the verdict? Obviously, with this whole investigation, I think with public opinion, there was a huge mistrust of police because of the allegations.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first trial, the first go around on this, the defense tried to build their case based upon a conspiracy, that Karen Reed was framed, that the others were responsible for the death, and that they tried to use a number of the people that were involved with the party there at the Alberts house as the basis of their conspiracy theory, and that police were protecting the Alberts there because the Brian Albert was a Boston cop, a retired Boston cop. Second trial instead was a battle of experts. The second trial had the expert on the side of the prosecutor that was trying to show that it was possible for Karen Reed to have hit John O'Keefe and caused his death, while the defense brought in their experts, which show that it was not possible, that she could not have hit him and have his body thrown where it was into the yard, and that it also would not have broken the taillight the way that it was said. And furthermore, the injury on John O'Keefe's arm, according to the defense's experts, was from a dog bite, a dog that the Alberts had and got rid of immediately in the aftermath of this death. And so you can see where the conspiracy is still looming over the case, even though the defense did not make that as a primary focus in the second trial.
There are so many working parts to this case. It really was crazy to see unfold in the courtroom, not once but twice. And like you said, they took different steps the second time around to try and prove their case. Now, thinking of John O'Keefe, this man is dead. His family has no answer still. There's really no justice for him right now. As a result of that, do you think that this could end up becoming a civil trial?
Oh, absolutely. There will be a civil trial. The O'Keefe's family will sue Karen Reed, and then the level of proof is far lower in a civil trial than it is in a criminal trial, as we saw with the OJ trial. If you recall, for the OJ trial, you're too young to remember the OJ trial, but
I've heard about it.
For those of us who recall the OJ trial, OJ was sued after the trial, and he lost that trial. And so likewise, Karen Reed could be sued in this case by the O'Keefe family, but again, it will boil down to experts.
Right. All right. Well, definitely a case that I'm sure will go down in history, and similar to O.J. Simpson, we'll be talking about this one for decades to come. Kenneth, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.